The Invincible War was one of the craziest events to ever take place within the Invincible series, and especially during Season 3. But today I'll be breaking down superhero universes that can not only solo the Invincible War, but deal with the Mark variants relatively easily. Now, there are a lot of different types of superheroes throughout media that probably all deserve their own dedicated videos to this topic, or just a topic on their own. But today I decided to merge these topics into one and break down superhero universes that would be able to comfortably deal with the 18 Mark variants. Now, before we break down any of these superhero universes we are going to be using, we have to estimate roughly where the variants scale to. We know that each variant varies in strength, with some of the stronger ones being close to our original Mark right before his fight with Conquest, but ultimately during the events of the Invincible War, they're all generally weaker than the Mark by Season 3. It's literally to the point where even characters like Oliver, Immortal, and even no-named heroes within the comics are able to at least defend against these variants. However, we do at least have a baseline where all of the 18 Marks should be at. You see, all of the variants are pretty much versions of Mark from Season 1 that teamed up with Omni-Man. This means these Marks should be basically stronger than the one in Season 1, as unlike that Mark, they have no moral compass. Meaning they're pretty much just Season 1 Marks with the Thraxa mindset, meaning they should be upscaling from feats like Mark casually stopping meteors. And based on calculations, this feat comes out to around mountain level, but I noticed on my rewatch that this meteor apparently was a threat to the entire country, meaning you can make a case for each Mark being capable of overthrowing a nation by themselves. Mind you, this is taking the show continuity into account though, which is very different from the comics. In the comics, everyone besides like Mohawk and Sinister are just fodder or characters we can't even quantify. Viltrumite Mark fought Spawn, but we don't know which version of Spawn this is, so it makes it very hard to really quantify this feat at all. And Omnimark in the comics died to a yo-yo. These guys generally all kinda suck, so we're going to be nice and give them their best scaling that we can during the Invincible War. So I'm gonna say the weakest Mark should be mountain level, with Sinister Mark, Mohawk Mark, and Omnimark being much higher than this. The reason why Sinister and Omnimark are placed so high is because they apparently defeated their father, which I mean at least puts them above most variants considering all of the other ones just kind of sided with him. But I can't say they're Omni-Man level or stronger than Omni-Man because we don't know how strong their version of Nolan was. Though if we take that meteor statement hyper literally and say that they can all stop a meteor that was going to threaten a country, then most, if not all of these Mark variants are just capable of wiping out nations. Now, as for speed, Mark's earliest showings have him traveling around Earth at over 800,000 kilometers per hour. This is Mark before getting a lot stronger, and we have other feats in the show such as Mark flying to the moon within a few seconds. Calculations put this feat at around relativistic, but I don't think it's the most accurate thing considering we don't get to see the full time frame of Mark flying, rather only just cuts and bits. And I don't think realistically every Mark is moving at percentages of the speed of light when they're getting tagged by people like Rex. Just like how all the variants vary in strength, they more than likely vary in speed as well. In all honesty, I don't think any of the variants really are that powerful besides maybe Mohawk Mark, who kind of fought our version of Mark. But even then, when Mark decided to lock in, he proceeded to one-tap bro. Sinister and Omnimark are carried by statements, and Sinister Mark does appear later on in the story and does appear stronger. However, this is a much more powerful version of the character, and it's not the same one that appears in the Invincible War. So before anyone in my comments goes, oh well, Sinister Mark scales to the Mark who blew up Viltrum, that version of Sinister Mark may scale to that stuff, but not this version. I think a good baseline to put the Mark variants is around massively hypersonic, considering Mark in one of the first issues of Invincible is moving at these speeds, and he blatantly is stated to be able to casually move at these speeds. But now with all of that out of the way, we can now get into some universes that I think could stop the Invincible War. We'll be first starting off with the Marvel Universe, which is something that Invincible already has teased crossovers with. And there's a specific hero that has interacted with Mark, and I think he's the perfect person to start us off with. And I already know some of you big-boned individuals are going to start crying for me putting a street-tier, non-bulletproof nerd who fights a Ferris wheel for a living up against 18 different versions of the strongest superhero. Well, Spider-Man is a character who I feel can become significantly more powerful depending on his situation. And the reason for this is because of one thing: adrenaline. You see, most power scalers probably recognize this one image, which pretty much explains the more stress and adrenaline that Spider-Man is experiencing, the stronger he can become. Which is the general explanation explanation as to why he's able to fight Heralds of Galactus and Hulk on one occasion, but then get shot or hurt by bullets on the other. Most versions of Spider-Man, like Mark, typically hold back in their fights, which, as most of you know, is the reason Mark was also getting overwhelmed during the Invincible War. So if you want to say the Mark variants come in out of nowhere and, you know, Spider-Man is trying to die down the situation, then of course I can 100% see him being overwhelmed by 18 Invincibles. I don't think that's ridiculous to say. However, if he sees, let's say, Sinister Mike blowing up Aunt May's house with Aunt May in it, or pulling a DO on Mary Jane in front of Peter, then Peter without a doubt would show no hesitation in the situation, allowing him to channel strength that would far surpass any of the Invincibles. Peter as well, thanks to spider senses, essentially knows what's coming before it happens, and he's able to fight the most skilled hand-to-hand fighters because of how effective this is. So it should be very simple for him to evade Invincible, who's just big, fast, and moves in a straight line for most of the time. And most of the variants as well are noted to be kind of stupid and arrogant, so Peter's definitely going to be finessing them. Peter's webs as well have restrained much more powerful characters than himself, so I'm sure restraining the variants won't be all that hard either. He's faster, more agile, has better equipment, and when he needs to be, he can far surpass any limit Invincible could only hope to overcome. And before you guys start saying that I didn't mention about speed, I mean, Spider-Man just reacts to lightning and light all the time thanks to his spider sense, so like I said, with his spider sense, he's not going to be hit by the variants. Now, let's flip the switch and head over to another universe that Invincible has also visited, that being DC. I think it's pretty obvious that the Justice League all individually have the means to take down the variants, let alone the fucking whole team itself, but I believe there is one member of the League who, despite being the weakest physically, has the most effective ways to put down the variants. That being, of course, Batman. This dude has just a ridiculous amount of technology along with unlimited knowledge of how to bring down anyone who's stronger than himself. Now, you see, Invincible's main weak point would be his ears, which I do not think it'd be hard for Batman to pick up on this, even if it's just with a brief encounter with him. He's known for picking up microscopic details in fights, and this weakness of Mark's is definitely not hidden very well. The moment Batman finds out sound works on Invincible, he's going to start playing that one Billy song after Rex died across the globe and just instantly wipe out the variants. Seriously though, he'd probably find a way to take them all out in one fell swoop. If not, then he'd be able to deal with them one by one. Batman, through his skills and countermeasures, was able to defeat far faster enemies than the likes of Invincible, with most versions of him usually reacting to lightning or light-based attacks pretty effectively. So even if you want to be like, oh well, Batman's a human, anytime he interacts with any relevant villain or hero, they somehow give him some stupid feats. For now though, we'll move away from comics, as it's pretty clear Marvel and DC could probably just solo with most of their relevant heroes. Now let's get into the cartoon section of things, where I'll be mentioning my GOAT, Ben 10. Now, I made a video dedicated to Ben 10 vs Invincible already, so go check that out for a more in-depth look on Ben's powers. Even without Alien X, it's pretty clear Ben could solo most of these variants, and he has a specific alien that could not only cover the numbers, but also hit Invincible with his own weakness. And that alien, of course, I'm talking about is Echo, and unironically, each individual clone of him should be able to generate similar levels of force as these Invincible variants, and they would have better speed scaling. And they would have better speed scaling since they would scale to characters like Kevin, who's just casually reacting to lasers all the time. But we know within Ben 10, Ben isn't the only hero available. If the 18 variants actually pull up within the universe, then characters like Kevin and Gwen, who both on their own are able to fight some of Ben's stronger villains, would come into help. Now, Kevin himself is really inconsistent, but I still believe he'd put up decent numbers against the variants, especially if we consider his higher end stuff. Despite being in his base form, he's able to uppercut Vilgax, and unironically, this one feat alone allows him to beat up most of the variants. Since most of them anyway kind of lack feats, and it kind of comes down to how consistent Kevin will be in this fight. But all I'm saying is, if they can lose to street tier stuff, then it's very possible for Kevin to at least take down one of the variants. Gwen herself, when she's in her anodite form, can single-handedly stop a planetary invasion, so dealing with 18 variants who may be a threat to the planet at best wouldn't be an issue. And Gwen, even without her anodite form at her peak, is still a beast, as she can fight and hold off characters like Ultimate Kevin and even Ben himself, who by this point are scaling to beings far beyond the planet-threatening scale. We are talking about versions of the characters that are fighting universal threats. Anywho, the issue is that Gwen herself holds back typically, so if she decides to be Car Torch level, then obviously she's just gonna die. But I feel realistically what would happen is Kevin would probably take down one of the variants, then he'd get overwhelmed, leading into Gwen then picking up on his slack and taking down the bigger threats. There are also other characters who can definitely be useful, like Grandpa Max, who, despite being a normal human within Ben 10, has many gadgets at his disposal and a gun that literally sends you into the gulag. However, if Sinister Mark were to try and be be cocky and stupid on Grandpa Max, he'd probably get shot by the null void projector, just like how he got shot by Best Tiger, and we would have a cannibal sinister mark just being trapped in the null void forever. Which, in all honesty, sounds kind of fire. Hold on, I'm making a fire narrative. Anywho, there are also other characters that could come in as well that did help out even despite not being friends with Ben, like Darkstar and Charmcaster. These two characters constantly fight with Gwen whenever she's locked in, so if they were around, then they would definitely help clear the invasion. Especially Darkstar, whose ability to absorb energy and get stronger is something that's seriously going to be annoying for any of the variants. And it's kind of fitting since they're basically fighting an even stronger and more twisted version of their biggest hater, aka Powerplex. Anywho, these guys within their own universe have stopped threats and even invasions on the level of or far greater than the 18 Invincibles, so I really don't see any reason to believe they'd get overwhelmed here. As far as mangas go, I believe the two main superhero verses that come to mind are My Hero and One Punch Man, and both at their peak, in my opinion, clear the invasion pretty easily. Deku himself at his strongest can single-handedly alter the course of the weather, which comes out to around at least multi-continental. And we've seen him, along with many other characters, just dodging or evading light-based attacks, so it's pretty obvious he'd be able to one-shot them. But, of course, Deku isn't the only other hero, and if you were to be like, oh, well, if this happened at the end of MHA, well, Deku would only be able to flip burgers. We still do have some very powerful heroes and forces to be reckoned with. If we have Bakugou, who would be the Rex in this situation, you know, giving his life so that he can take on the variants, maybe doing the same thing with his heart that he did against Shigaraki. Unironically, this Bakugou would be so fast and so strong, if the 18 marks were lined up, Bakugou could kill all of them before he died himself. Endeavor and Shoto as well are very big heavy hitters, considering Endeavor has power comparable to earlier versions of Allmight, and Shoto himself has flames comparable to Endeavor, along with ice so potent that it could even shut down Dabis' flames, which far surpass Endeavor's. Now, Invincible has gotten past elemental type attacks before, and due to their cells, they can regenerate at pretty ridiculous speeds. So it'll come down to if Endeavor and Todoroki's abilities can overcome Invincible's raw strength, which in this case, I do believe Endeavor and Todoroki can do it, but only if they're working together. You also have characters that are going to be incredibly annoying to deal with, like Tokoyami, Mirio, Kirishima, who, like with some of the other characters in Class 1A, have chicken nugget feats on much stronger characters, which I can say is much better than most of the variants who don't really do much. Now, One Punch Man, unlike MHA, has a lot more characters who are not only way faster, but also way stronger. For reference, by Season 2, Genos, who is still at the bottom of the S-Class barrel, he's capable of evading actual light, and every S-Class by the Monster Association would massively power creep this version of Genos. This is due to a stronger Genos being around human Garous tier, while the cadre that the S-Class combat should be stronger than half Monster Garou. And the S-Class, unlike the marks, have a lot of versatility. Metal Bat would probably grow so strong none of the marks would probably hurt him. I mean, we've seen him grow past the marks in power before against characters like Sage Centipede. And of course, we have Tatsumaki, who has psychic powers that can affect you on a cellular level, and if she was just pissed enough, she would wipe out all the variants instantly. Bang has martial arts that can reflect your own power back at you, which would 100% work on most of the variants. And even weaker characters like Tank Top Master can't really die unless he doesn't have his tank top. And Puri Prisoner, who, even despite being the weakest S-Class, can throw the pain that he's received back at you and even throw vibrational punches, having a form of Durin negation to an extent. And for reference, the cadre scale above fodder monsters like Evil Eye, who were literally wiping out cities. And not just a normal sized city. You see, cities in One Punch Man are far bigger than our own, with some of them even being the size of a fucking country. So just like how all of the marks might maybe upscale from this meteor feat that was maybe going to wipe out a country, these guys are fighting threats that can casually do this. Now, granted, not all of the S-Class would scale to this, but even some of the stronger S-Class are just far above the mark variants. And this isn't even me mentioning Blast, who could quite literally angstrom all the 18 variants into another dimension. And these are just some of the verses I believe that solo the Invincible War. If there are any other gauntlet type videos you guys want me to break down with other universes, then please let me know down in the comments.